All right, this is the demonstration that we're showing on that we showed in class on 3D camera tracking. Here's the file that you need to access. It's in the folder you'll find on the server under the class folder called 3D camera tracking. You'll see it right there. And in that folder you will find just basically one file, the jib clip. You'll just grab that clip, you'll import it into Premiere, and you're going to drag it, create a timeline out of it. Just this one clip that we're going to fix here. So we've created a timeline. We basically have the clip in the timeline there. As we've shown you guys this process many times, just sending this clip to After Effects. You're going to right click, send it to After Effects. Alright, and now I'm going to save it in my same folder here. I'm just going to call it Window Fix. So we're fixing some windows here. We'll look in the clip here in a minute. I'll show you what we're fixing. And we've sent it to After Effects. Now it's inside of After Effects. And as we scroll through this, as we kind of skim through this clip here, I'm going to change my quality here to third quality so this kind of skims a little bit easier here. So we skim through this clip, one thing you'll notice is that these windows here are lit up when we wanted them all to be dark. So we're going to darken out these windows, but one issue that we have here is that the camera is moving. It's on a jib. It kind of changes elevation. It moves closer to the vehicle. So these windows change in 3D space. So we're actually going to use a feature called the 3D camera tracker to fix this. Now first of all, we have to think about what we're going to use to replace these windows with. And if you move into the clip a little ways, you'll find this window right here. You probably don't want to use one of these windows over here because they're a little bit differently than these ones over here. But here's one that has the light turned off, so it's kind of fortunate. We can actually steal the window from here. We're going to use it to replace these windows here. And we'll show you how to do that. I'm going to go into Premiere, find that window, because Premiere's got an easy still image exporter. So we're just going to export a still out of this. We're going to get a shot where this window is nice and clear, right there. Okay, I'm going to use this little export frame thing here. Click on that. Well, and it'll export that frame that my playhead's on here. I'm going to call this window still. I'm going to browse to my folder. I'm going to save it in. I'm going to save it in my 3D tracking window. It's already positioned on that folder, so I'm going to hit choose and hit OK. It'll export that out. Now I'm going to tab to my Finder. I'm going to find that window still that I exported out right there, window still. I'm going to right click on that and open with Photoshop, because I'm going to fix this up a little bit in Photoshop just where I have a window and nothing else. And I'm going to use that as an object to replace these other windows. I'm going to cut out basically that window and use it as an object. So once this is opened up in Photoshop, I'm going to hold my Option and scroll to that window object there, or that window. I'm going to zoom up to it. So I'm holding down Option and scrolling here. And you can use your hand tool, H, same as in After Effects, to grab it and move it where you need to have it moved to take a look at it. I'm going to use my little box here, box selection. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of select this so I can get as much of this window in the frame as possible without getting other items in it here, because I want a little bit of room to play with here. So I'm going to do that there, and I've kind of gone to the extremes of these other windows here. I'm going to go to Image and go down to Crop, and it will crop this just down to that image right there. But now I can do this in After Effects, but in here it'll be a little bit easier if I just do it here. I'm going to make this kind of feather off the edges here so it blends into the image a little bit better, and turn this into a PNG, which will recognize an alpha channel. What I'm going to do is right click on this lock over here, because you want to make this into a layer. Backgrounds you can't change right now. This is still being read as a background. The first file you bring in is always read as a background in Photoshop. So I'm going to right click on that and make it into a layer. Just hit OK. And there we go. Now it's a layer instead of a background. Now I can edit this. I am going to use my select tool here. And I hit Command D or Control D to get rid of that selection that was already over it. I'm just going to kind of narrow it down here to just the window. Now what I want to do is I want to delete this outside here and kind of feather into the shot. So right now it's selected this inside. So I'm going to select the inverse. I'm going to go to select and inverse. Now it will select everything outside the window. Right now this is what's selected out here and not the window inside. The selection is out here. Now I can go to select and go to refine edge. I'm just going to feather this by a few pixels, like 2 or 3 pixels. And you can see kind of a little bit of a feathered edge there. Probably like 2.5 to 3 pixels there is going to do it. I'm going to hit OK. And you see that nice feathered edge. Now I'm just going to hit delete. And it deletes it around the window, makes a nice feathered edge. And that's probably maybe a little too much, but I think that'll work for this. So I'm going to hit Command D and deselect, and that's where I'm left with that little nice feathered edge. It'll kind of blend into the image nicely. So now I'm going to File and Save As, and we're going to save this as a PNG. On the three camera. Now the reason why I'm saving as if I save this as a JPEG, it would just fill this in with white. This checkerboarded area in with white. This checkerboarded area is what we call an alpha channel. This is basically a transparency, and I want that to be transparent. So I'm going to go down and choose a JPEG and a PNG. PNGs recognize alpha channels or transparencies. I'll save that as Windows Still PNG. Just hit OK here. I could have hit none on compression there to keep it the highest quality. It's going to be so small it's going to be barely noticeable anyway. So I'm going to close this now. You don't have to save because I saved it out as a PNG. Now I'm going to go into After Effects. In After Effects, I'm going to import this. Go to my Project tab. Double click. And I'm going to find that PNG. There it is. And open it. Bring it into After Effects. Okay, now that it's in here, I'm going to drag this into my timeline and drop it in. Drop it on top here. So you'll see the window on top. And now since I'm going to be working in 3D space, what I want to do with this window, first of all, is I want to convert it to what is considered a 3D object. And that is done by this little box down here. You'll see this little 3D layer box right here. Anything you check mark on is going to turn that into a 3D object that you can move around in 3D space. We don't have to change the jib clip, the background clip, to a 3D object because we're not going to be moving it around in 3D space. It's just going to stay put. So we're basically compositing, creating a 3D space on top of this, and using objects in that 3D space, and we have to define them as 3D objects. So I'm going to go down here and check mark on the window still. It is now a 3D object. If I select that, it'll bring up these little selection arrows, a new set of selection arrows. Brings up this little green arrow, this red arrow, and this blue arrow. You can't see because right now it is pointed directly at you. It's pointed right at your face, so you can't really see it. But if we end up rotating that, you can rotate that in 3D space, and it will, and you'll see that arrow pointing a different direction. So now that we've created this into a 3D space, we're going to be able to edit this and move it around once it has a 3D space to work in. Right now it doesn't have a 3D. It needs a camera added to create a 3D space. Basically what a 3D space is, right now, if we look at this image, this is a 2D image, just a flat image, and this is a flat image on top of a flat image. What we're going to do is add dimension to this. Once we add a camera to this and do tracking, it's going to create a whole 3D space. It'll figure out basically what objects exist where in space by the movement of the camera. I mean, this is a pretty amazing plugin that this does in After Effects. It'll figure out where this car is, about how many feet ahead of this wall it is, about how far this ground over here is by the movement of the camera. It figures that out by the movement of the camera. It does tracking points and figures how fast things are parallaxing and moving, and figures out how far this wall is back, how far this car is, how far these people are. And you're able to track to those objects and put things anywhere in this 3D space, which is really, really cool. So what I'm going to do now that I've added this window here and I've converted that to a 3D object, I'm going to select the jib clip. I'm going to go up to my little workspace area and tell it to do motion tracking, the motion tracking layout. So under the motion tracking layout, you'll see in this tracker area a track camera. This is going to create a 3D workspace based on the movement of your footage. So since this has movement in it, this is the right one to use here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select jib clip, make sure that's selected, come up and hit track camera, and it will start analyzing this clip and this jib clip here, and it's going to start placing several markers all over these things and track pixels all over the place. And if some pixels disappear, it'll take over on others, and it'll have a whole bunch of tracking data that it will use to generate a 3D environment out of this 2D shot, like I said, which is amazing. So now I'm going to let that track, and then I will be back in a few minutes to show you the rest. Okay, once it analyzes and it gets everything done, it does the two-step process, analyzes, and I can't remember the second part, but it configures it for the choices that you have selected here. Under your 3D camera tracker, once it's done all this, you'll see a whole bunch of these little dots all over the place. You can change some of these things here. The most common one is under shot type, it's going to be fixed angle of view. As opposed to variable zoom. Basically, this means that you are not changing your focal length. This is you're changing your focal length in camera. That means you're zooming in, not moving the camera, but actually zooming in. Because when you zoom in, your space compresses. When you take the camera and like actually dolly in and move closer to something, move the camera closer, then your space doesn't compress like it does with the variable zoom. So it needs to know what it's dealing with here. So fixed angle of view is the most common. Under advanced, you also have the type of solving that's going to do. That's what it does for the second step. It solves the camera, which figures out all the movement based on these settings here. Under your solve method, there's typical, which is well, auto detect is probably the best one to go. But if you have something that's mostly flat scene where you don't have a lot of changing angles, or if you have something on a tripod where the tripod's just panning, you can tell it that's what it's dealing with. Auto detect usually does a pretty good job of figuring out that this is not either one of those. This is not a flat scene. This is not a tripod pan. This is a typical move, which is a dolly or a crane move when the camera is changing angles by the camera actually moving. That's the reason why you want to use a 3D camera tracker. If the camera's not moving, you don't need to use a 3D camera tracker. You just go in and cut things out and paste things in on a still shot. It's like affecting a still image. Anyway, so now what we're going to do here is we're going to go in and we're going to start moving our mouse around on some of these points here. You'll notice it connects to the three closest points, which it uses these 3 points to create a plane. You are using these 3 points to create a flat plane. Basically, the plane being something like this wall right here. This wall is one single plane here. It's all going straight across, and you got the front of this vehicle, which is a plane. You got this wheel, which is a flat plane. But as you do that, you'll notice a little target shows up inside of these things. If you zoom in here, I'm holding Alt or Option and scrolling, and it zooms up. You notice it looks like that it puts a little target in here, and that little target tries to figure out the plane, the angle of this plane. And it puts a target in it. Sometimes it does okay, sometimes it doesn't. Right here it looks like it's kind of got it on an angle. So actually if you paste an object to this, it's going to be pointing off toward this direction up here, as opposed to looking like it's flat against this wheel. Right here it looks like it'll be flat against the wheel there, because the target is facing the same direction as the plane of that object that we're looking at there. I'm going to go up here to this window here, because we need something off this wall. So I'm going to move up here, and actually I just saw a target right there that looks like it's going the right direction. Looks like it's kind of facing out, like this wall is just pasted directly on this wall. So you want to find a target that looks like it's aiming in the right direction. That there looks like it's aiming toward us. It looks like it's pasted flat against the wall. Here it looks like there's a wall on an angle, so that's not going to work. So we need that right there. That should do. I'm going to right click on that target there and create a null based on that target and a camera. It'll create a camera and generate a 3D space. Click on that. You'll see the null that's been added down here, and you'll see the 3D camera tracker down here, or the 3D camera that is created based on those tracking points right there. So this is in cameras. You can grab that camera, move it around, and and you can do animation with camera moves and whatnot. But we're not going to worry about that here. We don't really need the 3D camera so much as the tracking points in 3D space. So now what's happened, now that it's created this 3D space and it's created, let me grab my window still, grab it up. If you select your window still, all of a sudden you know, and it's mainly because this was like a very large object, it was a 4K object, I cut out and made it kind of full screen. It's like sizes down really teeny in this 3D space here. But you'll see a really teeny window here. And you'll notice, actually, one thing I'm going to do with that window still is I'm going to grab that and parent it to the null. So now it will move with the null. If I move that across, you'll notice the window, wait for it, moves with the movement of the shot. So it's using the tracking from the null, so it's locked. But now all we have to really do is get this window resized, paste it over a window, and on the same plane as that target back there. So what we can do, the null was the tracking, I can talk. Here it goes. The tracking information that I put to the null was based on that target that was flat against that window. So it should be the same angle. So what I'm going to do, in the same z-axis, I'm going to go under the target null here. I'm going to go under transform, and you'll see its position. You'll see an x coordinates, y coordinates, and a z coordinates in 3D space that it's created. I'm going to select that, do Command C and copy, or Control C on a PC. Go to my window still, go to transform. I'm going to go to my z-axis on the position of the window here. Select it so you can see where I'm at here. I'm going to highlight that, and I'm going to paste the z coordinates into that area there. Now what that did is it kind of it used that information to basically put that on the z-axis, but it also positioned it. Oftentimes you'll find this thing in a weird location afterwards. You have to like zoom out usually to see this, because the x and y axis, it according to that z-axis, it put it in a completely different location. Anyway, it's up here, so you have to zoom out. You usually have to zoom out, and you'll see a little object. There it is, right there. Now it is on the same plane as this wall, but it's way over here. So all we have to do is really hit our arrow tool. I'm going to go up to the y-axis, grab this, and start pulling. You'll notice it goes really, 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 really slow. It's moving very slowly, so you can fine-tune this really well. If you grab it, start moving, and it's moving slowly, hold down Shift, it'll move a lot faster. It'll do it like, I don't know how much faster it'll do it, but it'll do it a lot faster. Shift will help you to get this into the right area. Once you get in this right area, this is kind of the tough part. Once you get in this to the right area, then it is see, and since the 3D camera space is pretty much invisible, it's kind of tough to tell where these coordinates are. So you have to start copying and pasting coordinates. It's easy to find that null object. I'm going to move this in. And one thing, since this is really small as well, I'm going to have to resize this. Like I said, this is kind of the tougher part here. Zoom up to it. Grab this, move it down. Right now it's really, really, really teeny. And you can't really go in here and grab a hold of the nodes. So what I'm going to do is go to Scale, down here under the clip, and I'm going to change this up. You're going to get this up to like 4,000% or so. It's going to has to go a lot larger, because this, like I said, this was a 4K image I grabbed this off of, so it's brought it down pretty small. But I'm going to size this up to the right size here, till it looks about the right size. Now I'm going to grab my y-axis here, and the way you grab these things, by the way, is you move it to the green. This is your y-axis. It'll show a little y next to your arrow. Down here, when it's on X, right there, you can grab this and move it left and right. This is up and down, this is left and right, and this is your z-axis. We're not going to touch that because it's on the plane that we want. So you can move that forward if you want to. You can move it forward. You can move it right in front of the vehicle, and you'll see this window floating out in the front of the vehicle and moving with the perspective of the camera, which is kind of cool too. So I'm going to move this down, get it in the approximate position. Okay, and now what I'm going to do, so I've got that in the approximate position. This gets easier once we create one of the windows here. So I've got it locked to that space right there. As this plays, you'll notice it'll move with the panning of the camera here, and it locks to that 3D space, which is cool. So now I'm going to go to effects and presets here. If you're not on effects already, pull this workspace down and choose effects. Once you do that, I'm going to grab a little effect called corner pin. Oops, gotta spell it right. Corner pin. I'm going to grab that corner pin effect right there. I'm going to drag and drop it onto this clip because we want to size this to make it look like the right perspective of the window here. So now I'm going to select, make sure I'm on highlighted on corner pin. You're going to go to the corners of this. And they're kind of tough to see, but there are actually little X's right behind your nodes here. You can just reach and grab here and pull that out, and you'll notice you got this little crosshair X that grabs the corner of this file and moves it around so you can get this thing, this window, exactly where you need it. Right now I'm at low resolution because I'm recording some crappy quality, but you're going to size this window with your corner pins to kind of match the window, the lit up window in the background. So you kind of get this. In some of these you'll have to guess a little bit and get it so it looks like it's the right perspective. Almost there. Right about there. So that window looks pretty good. It's covering it, but one issue that we have here is it's covering the door as well because it's pasted on top. We're going to take care of that last. So now what I'm going to do, I've got one of these windows created, and as we follow it, as we play through this, scrub through this, you'll notice the window, watch this, sticks into the spot where it's supposed to stay there. It moves with this. It stays in the spot where it's supposed to be locked in there. So okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate my window because I'm going to use this to copy over these other windows here in the shot. Move in where I can see all the windows that I need to blank out. So I got 3 more windows I need to blank out. So now what I have to do is I have to highlight this window, hit Command D, and the only thing I really have to do is move this new window over across this window. So I'm just going to grab the X-axis, hold down Shift. After I start moving it, I'm going to hold down Shift and move that window over. Scroll up to it, make sure that I've got it locked on. Get it lined up. Looks like the corner pinning on that first window is kind of wonky. I can go and fix that. You're going to hold down Shift, get it over the window, and you're going, once you get it in the approximate location, you're going to highlight your corner pin on that clip over in your effects panel. And then you're going to go up here and adjust the corners until it fills in the window in the right shape. And then you're going to do that. Once you get that adjusted, you're going to copy that, put it over the next window, copy it, put it over the next window until you have all those windows filled in. And do that on your own. Then I'm going to come back and show you once I've got all these windows filled in, duplicating. You're going to have 4 windows down here to cover these 4 windows up here. You're going to corner pin each one so it fits. So I'm going to do that, then I will be right back. Okay, so I've got all 4 windows done. I've corner pinned them, and now there's a couple issues here. I mean, you can see as you play through it, you'll see that they've locked on to the back screen here. They're under the back wall. They're changing perspective, but they all look way too uniform each. And a couple other things as well, as you'll notice that they're pasted over a couple items here. First of all, this window is pasted over this little thingy right here, over this little garbage thing, and then you'll notice the door here that's supposed to go in front of these windows. Now the windows look like they're in front of them. So we're going to have to do some rotoscoping now as well. So this gets a little bit complex as well, but we've taught rotoscoping, so you guys should be able to do this. It'll be some work, and that's what effects are, is doing a lot of work. So anyway, but a couple of things we can do to kind of we'll do that with finishing. Actually, we'll do that on the last step. Is we're going to kind of darken these windows here as they go further down, so they don't look so uniform. Actually, we could do those right now. Let's do that right now. I'm going to grab the far left window. I'm going to go to effects. I'm going to go to brightness. You can even do a mask over this whole thing, but then you'd have to animate the mask. So this is going to be probably the easiest way to go. Gonna drag it onto that window, brightness and contrast, and I'm going to tone down the brightness in that clip there, because as it goes further and further away, these kind of tend to fall off in the darkness a little bit more. So I'm going to bring down the brightness about to -6 there. See how that looks there. And that's looking like it's good, but the contrast needs to be a little. This is kind of a flat image, so we're going to kill the contrast a little bit, just make it a little darker, make the contrast so it kind of blends in with the background. And there we go. That looks pretty good there. And then you're going to have to, then this one is going to be just a little bit brighter, and then you'll continue on down the line until you reach the last window here. So I'm going to go to the next window. I'm going to grab my brightness and contrast, drag it to that window. Tone down the brightness, maybe like -4 on this one. Just going to click in the window here. -4. And contrast, -2. See, that kind of matches the contrast. And get it to where it matches, and then you make the next window a little less bright, and so on up here. So, and actually that looks better already. So now they tend to fall off a little bit as it gets darker and they don't look so uniform. But now we're going to have to do a rotospline for this shape here and for the door, and that's pretty much it, and we're finished. So, but that's going to take a little bit of time here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to the jib clip. I'm going to duplicate it, Command D. I'm going to drag it to the top here, to my top layer, so it's pasted over everything. And now I'm just going to cut this out here, do a mask that's cutting out over this corner here, and animate that mask. So I'm going to go to Home, and it's not showing up at the beginning, so I'm going to go somewhere in the middle where it shows up, kind of in the middle of where it shows up, about right there. And now I'm going to create a mask over this clip. So I'm going to hold down Option and zoom up to this, the edge of this. I'm going to use my Bezier tool. With this jib clip selected, I'm going to use the Bezier tool. And I'm going to click, 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 make just a little box over this. Is really all I have to do. So cut out that box, you'll notice there it is right there. So basically what I have now is, let me turn off the jib clip here, is that little box cut out and pasted on top of this window, and then the original jib clip behind that. So now we're going to have to animate that. So now we are going to arrow down this jib clip. Actually, I'm going to turn off all these windows so this thing runs a little bit faster, and actually with that light I'll be able to see my my jib clip a little bit more. So I'm going to shut everything off but the window here, and I don't want to shut off the 3D camera tracker, because if you shut that off, then it no longer does the 3D camera tracking. So I'm going to leave that on. It leaves the window there. Now I can zoom up to this clip here. It's a bit dark, and look at this clip cut out over the top of this window here. I'm going to choose my mask that I've created here. I'm going to grab that and just drag it down a little bit. We're going to end up feathering this a little bit in the end. Just pull it down a little bit there so it just covers the edge. Now I'm going to arrow down my mask and do some typical animation here on this mask. Arrow down this mask and turn on mask path right here so I can animate. Now what I'm going to do is move this forward like 5 frames and readjust my mask. Grab my mask. I can select an individual node here. I'm going to grab, all my nodes are selected here. If you deselect them, you can grab individual nodes, and move them around. But here I'm just going to, since it stays pretty uniform, I'm going to select all my nodes by hitting Command A or Control A. You'll notice it selects all the nodes. And then I'm going to move 5 frames down, several frames down, maybe 10 frames down, and reposition my spline. Make sure that it's on the end of my box there and not going over into the window. And then you're going to do this forward until you get that mask to animate all the way till it's off screen. And then as you go back, you'll want to do the same thing going backwards as well. You'll go back to this first frame that I set and go backwards, and you'll notice there it's the window's coming in view. So I'm going to grab this and reposition it and get it right where it needs to be. And once I'm done with that spline there, you'll just want to feather it a little bit. Go to the mask feather and just right down here under the mask and turn it up maybe like 5-6 pixels for feather, so it softens it around the edge. Then when we turn these back on, now it looks like that corner is covering the window. And now you got a little bit of the light there on the corner. That's not too bad, but with the feather, you've kind of taken care of that, softened it up a little bit. But you're going to have to animate that thing so it stays locked to this. So your spline stays locked to that from when it first enters the shot until when it exits the shot. And then you have to basically do the same thing on the door. Let me show you really quick. You guys will be able to, you'll have to do this on your own. I'm just going to quickly demonstrate this. I'm going to duplicate the jib clip again. I'm going to drag it to the top. I'm going to actually rename these things here. I'm going to highlight the first one and rename that corner of garbage. Looks like this big garbage can, corner of garbage can. And then I'm going to highlight the next one, and we're going to call this one car door. In the car door, we're going to cut out just this thing right here over the windows and animate that. So now we got to move a bit closer to the car door here. And this one's going to be a bit tough. This is going to take some work. But once again, that's what doing effects is. It's a lot of work. So you're going to click and drag. And actually one more thing I'm going to have to get that I'm noticing here is this door here from the garbage can. So right now I'm just going to get the door. And that's going to be enough of the door because that's the only part that cuts into the window here. Going to do a bit of a curve there, wrap around the corner, and there you go. Now what we're going to have to do is arrow this down, same as on any mask path that we're animating. Arrow down, go to masks, arrow down the mask number 1, turn on the animator there, and we're going to move forward like 5 to 10 frames and reposition all the nodes. This is a pain. I choose my arrow tool here, grab these things, reposition it. Notice down here it's kind of changed perspective, so now what we're going to have to do is deselect the nodes and grab some of these individually and reposition them to fit the door. And once we do that, then you will notice as we play from this animated spot to this, from this keyframe to this keyframe, you'll notice the spline changing shape and hopefully staying fit and still fitting with the door. And it'll run a bit faster on the systems that you guys are working on, but I'm on kind of a slow system with this recorder going. Anyway, and then as you reposition it, you'll do the exact same thing. After you're done and you got this animated and it looks like it's right, you go through frame by frame, make sure that it works, make sure that it fits, and then you're going to go under mask feather, feather this by probably a couple pixels, like maybe 3 pixels, so it blends in, and there you go. And then once you're done with that, you got to do anything else that blocks the light that goes in front of the door, and then you'll have an entire shot with the windows locked to the background. Then you'll have an entire shot that looks like this with the windows blocked out. You'll have this door moving and animating along and blocking the windows here, it looking like they're in front of the windows. See, I'm going to play just a little bit of this. You can see that looks like it's stuck to these windows pretty well. If you see any of this light shine out from beneath the windows, you'll have to go and readjust the rotospline. But for the most part, that looks like it's sticking. I didn't do the whole thing, but you guys are going to have to do the whole thing. I didn't do the whole thing for the demonstration, but I did have to do the whole thing myself for the movie. So there it goes. That plays. You'll see that stick in front there, and it looks like it locked to it pretty good. So anyway, then I just need to adjust this thing and this other plate that throws in front of the window, and you're done.